sometimes it makes sense to file a patent. Sometimes it doesn't. With software and other things, sometimes it makes sense to just keep it as a trade secret.
An influential leader. Our guest today is an entrepreneur. She is a mentor whose company is mentoring the next generation of entrepreneurs by working collaboratively with the high schools in her community. She is also in the process of helping transform an underserved community in Pennsylvania. Susan Springsteen's resume is incredible. Her experiences, the lessons that she's learned, are an inspiration to female founders, inventors, entrepreneurs, and everyone in between. This conversation today is going to go down 3 different journeys. You're going to hear about Susan's entrepreneurial journey as the CEO and co-founder of a couple different companies. One of those companies has over 60 patents, both nationally and internationally. You're going to hear about her journey of creating a mentorship program and a feeder program from the high school into her manufacturing company. And then finally, you're going to hear about what she is doing in and within her community and transforming the lives of so many. Let's jump into the conversation with Susan Springsteen. Susan Springsteen, welcome to the GST Factor podcast. So glad to have you here today.
Misha, it is great to be here. I am so excited to chat with you for a while and talk about getting stuff done.
I love it. I love it. Will you share with our listeners a little bit about your extraordinary story?
I am a serial tech entrepreneur, and like most entrepreneurs, my path to entrepreneurship was not a straight one, and it wasn't something I planned to do when I was younger. But I was in the investment business for 25 years, worked with, managing people's money, corporate finance, municipal finance. And I had a lot of small business owner clients who were asking me business strategy questions that went beyond managing their money. And I felt like, well, understanding how things work or understanding the game looks totally different on the field than it does in the bleachers, right? So I needed to get on the field from the bleachers and have money at risk in a small business and understand how it all works from an operational role. And so through church, I met my business partner. Long story short, we ended up buying the contents of his office and starting Solutions because he's just a brilliant product development individual with a deep understanding and knowledge base of intellectual property and manufacturing and marketing, actually. And it's hard to find that all in one person. And he'd had a great track record. So we started Solutions to be a product development, business incubation, and manufacturing company so that we were going to develop electronic products that save lives, save money, and preserve natural resources. That was our focus, and they would all be made in the United States. So, especially in 2006, everything was all the electronic manufacturing was fleeing overseas, and so we were trying to stem the tide as best we could with our little company. And so we developed, and we have really a broad level of expertise. We're able to do medical device. We're able to do all kinds of sensor technologies in multiple industries. So we ended up, long story short, we ended up discovering that there's a huge problem with tank toilets leaking, running, and overflowing. And a lot of the water wasting problems with toilets, property owners have no idea. They can't tell. And so we developed an electronic device that can diagnose, alert, and quantify all the types of water waste through tank toilets that can run up a water and sewer bill and waste a lot of water, right? Only 1% 2.5% of the world's water supply is available for potable use. And 2/3 of that is locked in the ice in Antarctica. So we don't have a lot of potable water available at the moment. We have to take care of it. So leaking through toilets is not great stewardship. So anyway, we developed this device, and ended up forming a company around it and spinning it off of Solutions, and that has become H2O Connected, and I run that business as well. So So I would say that if you want to classify me, I'm a serial tech entrepreneur.
What is amazing about your story is how you saw a need, but you saw the need that you wanted to be on the field, right? You wanted to be able to get out there as your own entrepreneur, and you did some amazing market discovery, right? That has led to these inventions, that's led to so many patents. And I want you to dive into that here in a moment. But talk to us about the importance of when you are looking for those inventions, you're looking at that market discovery. How do you know when you have something that is worthwhile, and then something worthwhile to protect from a patent perspective? Because I think, first of all, you are one of our first inventors and entrepreneurs on the show that has multiple patents, which I think is amazing. But I think it's so important for our inventors and our entrepreneurs that are listening that may have something that is worth patenting. And I want you to talk about what that journey has been like for you.
Wow, those are quite a few. Those are a couple of different questions. So I'll try and answer them. First of all, we always have our eyes open, looking for opportunity. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we're always trying to, we're always trying to find the next nail, right? So my business partner, and I'll do it to a lesser extent, but he'll walk up and down the aisles of Home Depot, of, any of the big box stores, looking for, what's not on the shelf but should be. And then sometimes it comes from people asking us questions. Sometimes it comes from our clients. We'll have inventors come in here that'll have a crude prototype or have a concept on a napkin. And we have a vertically integrated company. So we can take something from concept on a napkin all the way through to protecting it with intellectual property, product development, optimizing it for manufacturing, and then ready for distribution. But we always start with the market. Because a typical thing that happens is somebody comes up with a great idea, and Aunt Martha says, "That's a great idea. You should start a company and go on Shark Tank," And it might be a great idea, but the idea may be great just for a niche. And so if you're going to put in the personal time, the personal cost, and the financial cost of actually developing something and building a business around it, you need to make sure that the market is large enough and the profit margin is there, over a tier or two tiers of distribution, so that it's worth the return, right? So we start with market study, and we really look at, who is the ideal customer, what will they pay for it, who are the competitors. A great source of due diligence if you're thinking about developing a product is go on Amazon and look at something that's the closest thing to what you want to develop and read the 1-star reviews. You'll find what people hate about the current way they solve that pain point, right? And then you can see, can I solve that problem? And so what does it take for me to not get those 1-star reviews? And the 5-star reviews help too, but finding where the flaws are in the current problem you're trying to solve can really give you a leg up. So that's just an example. And then once we realize, that the market size, for instance, H2O Connected, 300 million tank toilets just in the United States, 1.4 billion, we think, globally, but nobody's counting, really. So that's a big market. And so, how were they solving it now? Well, there really wasn't a solution, since they were doing it with dye tabs or food coloring or, reacting to a toilet overflow. But there wasn't anything that gave them either any kind of predictive knowledge or gave them knowledge on so many of these small leaks that you can't see or hear, but they're wasting 200 gallons a day and costing you $50 to $75 on your water bill, or $800 on your water bill if your chain hangs up and you leave the house for a day. So, so we were able to develop the system. We knew we had the market. We also knew that it had to be simple to install with somebody looking at four pictures. I mean, people don't have a lot of patience. In the United States, they don't read directions. If you're selling something into the Far East, they will read directions and they will read them twice, and then they will start to put whatever the product together. Not in the United States. We open the box, we plug it in, we expect it to work. So we had to make sure that it's a market study. It has to work right away. It has to be easy to use, red light, green light, and we have a wireless version now too of leak detection. So, that actually sends out data to text messages, and, there's a dashboard and things like that. But everything has to be super easy to use. So you have to know your market, and then you have to know you can make it, inexpensively enough, so that the rule of thumb is your cost of making a product should be 20 to 25% of your end user price. So people, I think they make a product and they think, well, I'm making it for $5, I'll sell it for $10. That's really not good enough if you have to have a retail store in the middle, so, and they forget about how much of their own time they're putting into it. They don't value their own time. They don't put a cost on their own time. So there's just a lot to it. So on the patent side, the first thing you need to decide is, does it make sense to patent it or not? In order to patent something, it has to be what the patent office calls unique and non-obvious. And it means that somebody who is familiar with they call it the art, but the technology group that you're in wouldn't already have thought of it, even if they didn't patent it. So, and then there's a lot of things, it's like a chess match. There's a very specific strategy that you use when filing a patent. They're all different types. There are ways of extending the protection. You need to tell a story. There's just a lot to it, and that's something that we're experts in. I mean, sometimes it makes sense to file a patent. Sometimes it doesn't. With software and other things, sometimes it makes sense to just keep it as a trade secret. For instance, your patents give you a legal monopoly for 17 to 20 years, depending. But at the end of 20 years, everything goes into the public domain, and it's a free-for-all for anybody who wants to copy, your idea, your technology. For a trade secret, it's yours for life, as long as somebody doesn't pirate it. Nobody talks. So if you think of, for instance, the recipe for Coca-Cola, that was never patented. It's kept in a vault. It's always kept as a trade secret, and only a few people really know it. And so that intellectual property can belong to Coke forever, because it's never going to be out in the public domain unless somebody squeals. So there's a lot of times that you keep things as trade secrets. So it's trying to decide, and then, you have to also know, if you file a patent, if somebody infringes, are you going to defend it? And that can be expensive. There's just a lot of questions that we have 30 U.S. patents that have been issued over the last 15 years, but a lot of them we're issuing now, probably 3 or 4 a year. And then we have probably 30 international patents as well. So that's another question. Do you patent it just in the United States? Do you do it outside the United States? Is it worth it? So it's, and only interesting fun fact, only 3% of issued patents actually generate revenue. So most of them don't generate revenue. Now ours do, because we don't bother unless we think it's going to be a revenue generating technology. We don't just have patents just to have them hang on a wall. But so it's something you need to have good advice, and it has to be beyond legal advice. If they're going to have value, then they need to be created for that value, and that takes a strategy. Like somebody who really you have to build the business tangible nature into the patent. It's not just protecting, how a widget is done. It's building the tangible value, and that goes far beyond just the legal aspect.
Well, folks, there you have it. You have Susan Springsteen's Product Development 101. I mean, incredible nuggets and lessons for those that are inventing and those that are looking out there, from the product discovery, market studies. Do you patent? Do you not patent? Is it a trade secret or not? Or is it revenue generating? It's so shocking that only 3% of patents are revenue generating. But Susan, thank you for for your nuggets of wisdom and sharing that with our listeners, especially our high schoolers that are listening in to our special Get Stuff Done episode today. And I want to now pivot our conversation into, you're doing two very unique things, but I first of all want to talk about what you are doing for your high schoolers in your community and your mentorship program. Because as everyone has just heard, they just had a 10-minute 101 product development class, which is incredible. But now share with our listeners how you're being influential with the high schoolers in your community.
We love working with our high school students. About 10 years ago, I know that one of the themes that you've been talking about is for this year is sort of going into your extraordinary or capturing your extraordinary. And I think in order to really do that, it can't be about you, right? It can't be about us. You're not going to be really extraordinary unless you're doing something larger than yourself. And in my opinion, that's just my value system. Take it for what it's worth. And so part of that is paying it forward and sowing into the next generation. And we have a high school STEM and marketing internship program here where we work with 9 different high schools. We've been doing it about 10 years, so probably 120, 130 students have gone through the program. We have anywhere from 10 to 18 high school students, and they start as either sophomores or juniors in high school, and they work for us 3 days a week until they graduate. So it's all year round and it's paid. And they work alongside the professionals to learn how to develop products and launch them into the marketplace. And because they are so tightly working with our professionals, a lot of them end up as named inventors on our patents that issue. So because they actually do contribute to the inventive process. I think we have 10 patents down there now, in Inventors Hall. We have an Inventors Hall where all the patents are being displayed, and where our high school students are named inventors. And it's, imagine at a time when it's very competitive to get into your top tier schools or your first choice school, you're a 17, 18-year-old high school student and you're a named inventor on a revolutionary automotive sensor device. It's, or a leak detection device, or for what we do. Well, I don't think we have any students on the H2O Connected patents, but we've developed a very revolutionary device that detects vibration and problems for the automobile industry. We can detect things in a way that they haven't been able to date, and we can do it much cheaper and less expensively than how they do it. So we've probably got a dozen patents there, and a lot of our interns have been alongside that product development and are part of the patents. So it's great, and it's interesting to watch them grow when they come in as sophomores. A lot of them are afraid to fail. They've never really interacted outside of their little niche group of friends, and so we teach them to fail. We put them in situations where they have to fail because it's something you got to learn in life. You got to learn how to deal with failure. And product development is 99% failure until you get it right. So,
that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, so they do that. They learn to present to clients. They really, it's great. By the time they're seniors, it's amazing to watch the whole personal growth side. They have to do reports every day. So they learn how to be really good, valuable employees.
Oh, that's amazing. I think it is so incredible what you're doing to equip and empower that next generation of entrepreneurs and inventors. And the fact that those high schoolers are on 10 of those patents is incredible. So thank you, Susan, for being so influential with the next generation. And The second part of this incredible journey and story is what you are doing for your community. You talked about how all the manufacturing happens here, but talk to us about how you and your companies are being influential within your community and transforming that community.
Well, I want to just first touch on the students. I just think the main thing that the skills that they're learning, it's great that they're getting involved in STEM and entrepreneurship, but they're learning confidence. I mean, all these skill sets are transferable. So they're learning how to handle failure. They're learning how to critically think. They're learning confidence. They're learning resilience. Like they're learning life skills that go far beyond, you know, whether they know what a Kalman filter is. It's just so I just wanted to leave and that's, I just think that's the real value, and but anyway,
And I want to piggyback off that for a second because before you said you allow them to fail. And I think
right.
so many times there is this idea of we're expecting a world and a society is expecting perfection, but how else are they going to learn? I'm a huge proponent of fail fast and fail forward. And I think that so many times, especially our high schoolers, we're not allowing them to fail. We're not allowing them to go through that process. And I think that that really is what helps build their character.
And failing fast and forward is actually it's almost a mantra in Silicon Valley. I mean, they really try to do that. And it's hard as an entrepreneur because you're emotionally involved. So you don't want to fail. You don't want to let it go. And there are times you do need to cut your losses and move on. Um, so, but anyway, getting back to the community, this was really, I have to say, this wasn't anything I planned. It's just that when we spun off H2O Connected, we wanted to make it a qualified opportunity zone business because the qualified opportunity zone which is something that came under the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or Jobs and Tax, whatever that's called. Anyway, the 2017 Tax Act. And it was an initiative that gave benefits to companies or real estate projects that met certain criteria in marginalized, low income, high poverty areas. And so that had made me look at our only city in Chester County where I live, same Coatesville, and I wouldn't have looked at it otherwise. It's 13,000 residents, 1.9 square miles. It's tiny, but it's been a struggling steel town for a long time. And so I just fell in love with the town and the people there. And so we decided then to actually get involved in a real estate project and move the entire End Solutions, H2O Connected, the whole kit and caboodle to Coatesville. And we're very much involved in taking a boarded up building, a 1902 office building that had been boarded up for 20 years, and doing an adaptive reuse and adding 20,000 square feet behind it into the Nth Innovation Center. So it was the first major private commercial construction in the city in 50 years. So it's a big deal. And I've just, become very, very much involved in the city. I mean, I think because we're so heavily involved in entrepreneurship, it sort of helped foster the entrepreneurship in the city. I think a lot of times folks that are struggling, especially folks in our manufacturing, we try to hire returning citizens, those in recovery, and others with barriers to employment. That also helped me get involved in the community itself. And I think that a lot of those folks have real entrepreneurial skills. They just don't see them that way. A lot of times someone who ends up in jail was buying or selling something they shouldn't have been. And, they know their market, they know tiers of distribution, they know cost of goods sold, they know how to expand their business. They just now have to take those skills and use them for good and not for evil. And so, so a lot of them, they can't get jobs, so they start their own sort of small businesses. So we've been able to sort of come around them and teach them some of the other tips and tricks for growing these individual businesses so that they can really grow and and be taken seriously beyond their local, network. So we're happy with that. We're hoping to do another building. We've attracted some other entrepreneurs into the city, but it's, the qualified opportunity zone really was a good win-win, because to get the benefits, you have to be in the community for 10 years. So if you're in a community for 10 years, you're going to get involved, especially a small community. So it really does. It does bring a lot of economic development in, but you also see what some of the real issues are. And it's sort of made me a little bit of a crusader for trying to this is like rolling a boulder uphill, but the way public assistance is set up really keeps people from being able to get out of poverty. They're not necessarily just lazy sitting on a couch eating bonbons collecting checks. They can't make the leap beyond what they get. Their benefits get cut off as they start to make more money, but they don't make enough money to survive without the benefits. And so they're scared. And it's a while. It's like they have to make twice as much money to survive on their own without the benefits. So they end up being scared and not taking a raise. Their kids can't get jobs. I mean, I've learned a lot. One thing, if you're in a community like this long enough and you earn the trust of the folks in the community, they finally start to tell you what the real issues are. I think part of the problem with folks that come in from the outside is that we guess. We don't always guess right. And so we're not as effective, and really it takes a while for people to trust you, because lots of folks come into these marginalized towns and they get public money to do good. And the minute the public money runs out, they leave. And so there's a real distrust. And we've stayed and we've been accessible. The building has a multi-purpose room that everybody uses for all types of different community events, and so it's really worked out. It's really worked out well, but it takes time, and they're big problems. Housing's a problem, the education, getting good education, but I see that the tide is changing for the better, and that's encouraging.
One of the things that I think is also huge in this transformational journey that you're taking your town on is also you stayed and you listened and then you acted. And I think that, to your point, outsiders coming in, they don't take the time. Just like in customer discovery or market study, you have to ask the questions, but then you have to pause and listen, and then use that in order to take action and take the right action. And if you don't do that initial listening, you're going to take the wrong action many times.
Yeah, I think the whole listening thing is really huge, and you have to come at it with real humility. I mean, it's very tempting to think we have all the answers, and we don't, because we aren't them. And Coatesville, I really respect a lot of the folks in Coatesville, because we didn't have a grocery store in Coatesville for 20 years until last year. So if you don't have a car, you're having to take the bus to 2 towns over, get your bags of groceries, get on the bus, get home, walk home from the bus stop. I mean, getting food is an issue. And so there's been a lot of challenges, and they have learned to really lean on each other in a way the suburbs does not. When something goes wrong here in this community, they circle the wagons. And it's really impressive to see. It really is. The suburbs could learn a lot from towns like this. When I first got here, I thankfully had the presence of mind, you'd never guess it though, to keep my mouth shut and listen. And I showed up everywhere, to every event I could possibly go to. I showed up and just listened, because I wanted people to see me often, because one of the things I think when people come into these towns, they cherry pick where they show up. They show up where the beautiful people or the influential people are going to be, but they don't show up necessarily to the community events. And some of it, I didn't know anybody. I just walked into a room and started talking, and obviously I stuck out like a sore thumb, but over time I got to know everybody. And I just, it was just really, it just worked out really, really well. Now I'm invited to the baby showers and the weddings and the anniversary parties. And, so it's just really, and the folks that have been here for a long time, Coatesville's a little different than a lot of underserved communities or, low income communities in that because we're surrounded by such a wealthy area, Chester County itself is the wealthiest county in Pennsylvania. I think it's the 26th in the country. It's very wealthy, billionaires everywhere. But there's like this picket fence around Coatesville. Those folks don't come in, right? And so because of that, a lot of folks in Coatesville don't go out either. And so they all end up intermarrying. And so everybody's related. So when something happens, either housing prices go up and somebody has to leave, or something negative happens to a family, about 27 families are affected. It really affects everybody. And so, what we've wanted to do is, I know it's Pollyanna, but try and do the rising tide raises all boats. I mean, not everybody's going to participate, but try and help folks really elevate their own businesses, their own acumen, their own business experience, so that as this town revitalizes, they can take advantage of it, and they're not sitting there with their nose pressed against the glass, wondering why the opportunities aren't coming to them. Now they have to do the hard work, and it is hard. It's hard for everybody. But if they do, they should be rewarded. And then they can buy. How do they get to buy their own home? How do they get to, so that the charm of this very diverse city stays intact, and it doesn't become something different than what it is today. We would love to keep all the diversity and the culture and the history of Coatesville today, just elevated so that, and sort of, every town has its underbelly. So get rid of the underbelly, raise up everybody else. It all sounds very simple. It's very hard. And everyone tells me it'll never happen, but I refuse to give up.
But how confident of you and the influence that you're making. And I want to go back to something that you said, because I think, again, this is networking 101. It's how to be a leader 101. And you said, I came in and I immersed myself into the community. You didn't cherry pick, you just immerse yourself into everything. And I think, how many times are individuals going into companies, whether they're at the leadership level or not, but they don't necessarily immerse themselves. They don't learn, they don't listen, they don't ask questions. And I think when we're being inquisitive and transparently inquisitive and actually wanting to learn, it makes us that much better of a person, but also a leader. And now, armed with all of that information, now you are guiding that community and guiding and transforming it and revitalizing it. And how much more impact could we have in everybody's lives if we were to take that approach into any new thing that we were doing?
Yeah, I think, but I think my motivation also dovetails back to my faith story, because I'm a committed follower of Christ. I really believe that we're to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and that is my motivating factor. I think a lot of it has to come from your value system and your worldview, and I think that it's just that, and I think in a way the Lord has opened people's hearts to me, because my why. Everyone says, find your why, and being in Coatesville and being a part of this community and trying to help people and using the businesses, almost for-profit business. We're all making money. We're going to make money for our investors, all that. But there's also a stewardship aspect to the community. So it's a very holistic approach. And so I think that's where that gives you the resilience. right? It gives you the resilience. One of the things I realized a long time ago is when my career stopped being a career and started being a calling, it totally changed my mindset. All of a sudden, I had more confidence because I felt like this is what I was put on earth to do. And there's lots of promises in the Bible about God seeing you through tough times. Doesn't mean it's all going to be a rose garden, but he doesn't leave us or forsake us, right? So that gives me confidence. It gives me the resilience to keep at it because nothing is easy. Nothing worth doing is easy, whether it's a relationship or whether it's a business or whether it's raising kids or whether it's a world-class athletic endeavor, whatever is your why, it's never going to be easy. And, and it's going to take everything you have. So I think a lot of that, I just dial back to my worldview. I love the quote by Mark Twain. It says, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you found out why. And I think that why enables you to really get stuff done.
Absolutely. Oh, love that. What an amazing conversation, Susan. And we've talked about inventions and being an entrepreneur. We've talked about what you're doing to transform and guide and mentor the teenagers and the high schoolers, and now what you're doing in the community. Thank you so much for dropping so many nuggets and taking us to school in so many different ways. One final question. If a female founder is listening to you today in our episode, what is that one piece of advice you would give that female founder on how to step into your extraordinary?
I would have to say, this is not going to be what you think. I think before she does it, I would advise her to count the cost. I love what I do. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. But society really romanticizes entrepreneurship. And there's a difference between owning a business, being a business owner, and being an entrepreneur. Business owner, you start a business, it's for profit, but there's usually some kind of framework for if you're starting a law firm or a retail store or anything, somebody else has done something similar. When you're an entrepreneur, you're developing something that hasn't existed before and you're doing it at scale. So, especially as a woman, there is a personal cost. Mm-hmm. You're going to have, if you're young and you want to have kids, if you're an entrepreneur, there is no such thing as work-life balance. And you can have everything, but you can't have it at the same time. So at least when you're starting and in those early years, you're not going to have work-life balance. You're going to miss time with your kids. Make sure your spouse or whoever your life partner or whatever, your significant other, is on the same page. Because I've watched businesses relationships get destroyed because the woman was following an entrepreneurial dream that left her no time for anybody. Mm-hmm. So it's going to also, if you're married, it's going to cost you in, either not taking a salary or having to invest your own money. So you need to make sure your spouse is on board with family finances and what that's going to cost. So it can be a wonderful journey, and you can impact a community as an entrepreneur in a way you can't in other ways. And believe me, the feeling of seeing your product on the shelf, of getting a call where your product really improves someone's life, it's amazing. We have products here that save lives. And when we see that happen, it's amazing, but it doesn't come without a cost. So I would say for an entrepreneur, besides doing a market study, count the cost and really make sure that is that's in it for you. It's not a decision to be taken lightly. That's what I would say.
Such great wisdom. Susan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And thank you to our listeners. And don't forget to keep getting stuff done. Have
Absolutely.
a good one.
Every single day.
Thank you for listening to the GST Factor podcast. I'm your host, Misha Blaymeyer-Farish. Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, as I love connecting with our listeners to hear how you are getting stuff done in your personal and professional life. be sure to visit our website at gsdfactor.com, where you can take a persona assessment that's going to help you figure out what type of GSDer you are. There's also a ton of resources and tools for both yourself and your tiny humans in your life. We appreciate you rating and subscribing our podcast episode today. And don't forget to get stuff done.